And it's a pleasure to have you on. I love meeting with entrepreneurs that have interesting, cool companies, and I find in particular what you guys are doing with Marlow is really fascinating, and it's a topic that I know nothing about. Well, I should. I'm married, so I should have a bit of knowledge about it. But I want to maybe set the table before we talk about Marlow to talk about women's health and what is most understood today, how you see it, women's health, the state of women's health today.
Definitely. Well, thanks for having me on. And I think with women's health, it's really interesting because it's still quite viewed as a niche space and it's quite stigmatized. So I remember as when we were building Marlow, talking to different individuals, and we'd always get the question, isn't this a niche space? Even though it affects almost 50% of the population at some point in time, there's a lot of aspects to women's health that are being viewed in the media more frequently. So menstruation, which we're focused on, reproductive health, contraception, fertility, menopause. There's so many different areas to women's health. And now we're just starting to see more recently innovation in this space. There's the whole area of FemTech where people are focused on finding new innovations to support women's health. And so I think it's been really exciting to see some of the developments in the more recent years and see how the conversation is shifting to be less stigmatized and more just something we talk about and not a niche space.
Yeah, it feels like there's more of a groundswell of companies being formed. Like you mentioned, femtech and women's health in particular is something that's been growing a lot. Do you have any? I imagine you must speak to your fellow entrepreneurs about this, right? Like, do you have a sense for startup formation in this space? Do you feel that there is a lot more innovation happening just by virtue of your network?
There's definitely more innovation happening, especially here in Canada. We have an organization called FemTech Canada that just started up recently, and there's a whole portfolio of companies on the website of different innovations in women's health. And even now, starting to go to some pitch competitions or apply to grants, you see a lot more women's health companies coming up in these types of startup networking spaces. So I think there is definitely a push, but there's so much more to be done as well.
How did you identify that as, let's say, the problem space you wanted to focus on? Was your decision process to launch Marlow like, hey, I want to do a startup, like I have the energy and drive to want to go out and venture on my own route, or you stumbled upon the idea and you're like, okay, well, no matter what, I need to solve this. So, like, which one was it when you decided to, like, go out onto your own?
It actually more was that we stumbled across it. So it started in our last year of university. We were all studying at Western at the Ivey Business School, and in that program, we had to take a capstone project, and it was around entrepreneurship. And our professors told us that we had to find some problem space that we were passionate about solving. And I remember that I had read recently around that time that the modern tampon hadn't changed in the last 90 years. And I just remember being so shocked because you see so much innovation around us with technology and AI, and we're sending people to the moon, yet the tampon hasn't changed in the last 90 years. So that was something that we were just excited about. And we started talking about it as friends who are now my co founders and just sharing about, it's something that affects us every month of our lives for 39 years, but it's not something we talk about. And they're my closest friends, yet we had never really talked about that together. And so it kind of led us to all these different problems that we saw in the space. The branding is really overly feminine. It's always pink and flowery packaging, and that doesn't really resonate always with the more modern consumer and with the more inclusive kind of overall gender neutrality of menstruation, that it's not just women who menstruate. And there was problem with the products and overall the conversation in the space because it's so stigmatized. It leads to women thinking that there might be something wrong with them if they can't use the products, whereas it's actually more that the products need to change. And because people feel nervous to talk about these topics, they don't realize that the things they're experiencing, so many other people are experiencing as well. And it's normal to experience those things.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear about, like, just this old product that's been around forever. Obviously, like you said, time is pretty big, half the population, right? But
Mhm.
no one necessarily, spends a lot of time, and with a good reason. There's like giants in the space that dominate it,
Mhm.
so very competitive, kind of red ocean, you would imagine. Of
Mhm.
where do I start a company? It's like very saturated, mature industry, maybe less so. So how did you go about once you knew, okay, this is a problem I want to tackle, to validating an idea, to come up with an idea that, hey, we're gonna try and innovate in this area.
It was during those conversations with our co founders that one of my co founders shared a specific problem that she experiences, and that's the pain inserting tampons. And she's always been an active individual. So she loves to play sports, she swam, And she always felt that not being able to use a tampon really limited her in her active lifestyle. And even people on her team would take a break from training while on their period. If tampons are painful to insert, the only alternative is to use a pad. And that can be really limiting in your performance. It's very bulky, it's uncomfortable. And so there was this whole need for people who needed the product. And I remember after hearing her story, we started to speak to different people. We ended up speaking to over 200 menstruators and learned that it wasn't just her problem. It was so many people were experiencing it, whether they had vaginal dryness, whether they had a lighter flow, usually due to birth control, whether they had hormone changes post-pregnancy, different medical conditions, or even people who were new to using tampons. Maybe they were in their tween years and they had a lot of anxiety. So we realized that it wasn't just a problem we experienced. It was something that was so widespread among so many different people. And that really led us to kind of dive into finding potential solutions. We had gone to the gynecologist, my co-founder, and she had asked for advice. And the gynecologist told her to spit on her tampon to make it easier to insert. And we were just so shocked. We knew there must be a better way. And that led us to testing different things with Vaseline or just seeing what could work and eventually landing on the idea of a lubricated tampon and just being shocked that something like this didn't already exist.
So okay, so the that's it's a great story. That's a great startup story. It's like, hey, like, why is this thing being done this way? So once you came up with this idea, you develop this initial product. How does one go about then doing this? I imagine it's like, except there's still it's a tough subject to broach. It's not like, hey, try this app. How do you then get the first users to actually use the product, get actual validation from from the ground?
Mm-hmm. At first, we just sent the product out to a bunch of people to test it and get their feedback. It was essentially just a bottle of lubricant, and we asked them to just see the overall concept of using lubricant and tampons together. And we got the feedback that it was quite a messy process. People described it as arts and crafts in the bathroom stall because they were essentially squeezing lubricant over a tampon. And so it was then that we realized we had to find a way to make it really convenient and a mess-free process. And so we've actually designed our bottle to be a one-dip process. You essentially dip the tampon into the lubricant and it has a cross slit valve so that it evenly coats the tampon. And so I think that was one way, just getting that initial product feedback. Once we got that feedback and brought the product to market, our biggest strategy for growth has been through TikTok. And I think it's been a really interesting platform for our audience. People there have no filter. They'll just talk about whatever they want on the platform. And so connecting with more of that Gen Z modern consumer on the platform. And we've had quite a few videos go viral, which is really exciting as well. It's such a surprising product that people want to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll get into the distribution go to market in a second because I have like a few thoughts and questions, maybe challenges on your go to market. But so going back to maybe just your personal story of you're working at KPMG, you got a safe job. Obviously, you had worked, studied hard to be able to land a job at a prestigious firm. You started developing Marlow, if I understand correctly, part time on the side. When did
That's
you have the enough, let's say, validation or proof point, or just let's say, chutzpah to like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to quit and then go full time. So yeah, give us a bit of a sense of that time.
So we started it in our last year of university. It wasn't something we thought was necessarily going to be a passion. It was just a passion project. It wasn't going to be something that we all pursue full time, but it was really through the encouragement of some of our professors to say, I actually think you have something here. It's so surprising that this doesn't exist. You should keep working on it. And so during the summer, we had all had plans after we graduate to go travel and do things, and COVID kind of shut that down. So we actually had a whole summer of just working full time on Marlow, getting things out there, testing, building the brand, and we all kind of started our jobs in September. But after kind of building up our community throughout that year and after raising $500,000 from investors, we thought, okay, now's the time to take a risk and see what happens. And it was a big jump, but we were thinking, okay, we're young, we don't have many expenses, so we might as well just give it a shot and see what happens. And it's been going well ever since. So it's really exciting that we took that leap and now seeing how it's going so far.
Yeah, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? As they say. So beyond the money, like the 500K, I guess, like obviously it's an easy milestone, but community seems harder to me, right? Or it's like, how do you build a community around the product, particularly one that's so nascent? So you mentioned TikTok. Was that kind of the key to building community around it? Was there other tips and tricks?
That was the main strategy. We're overall kind of a digital first brand. So we also have a big Instagram following and we post a lot of educational content. So we knew we just didn't want to be a product. We wanted to participate and be at the forefront of the overall movement that's happening around women's health and specifically menstrual and sexual health. And so we post weekly Mythbusters, we post blog content, and we try and approach it in a really easily digestible, kind of almost funny way. And I think that really resonated with consumers because it's such an intimate space, but people don't have brands that they really resonate with and that they feel really connected to. And so we saw this opportunity to form really personalized relationships with our community and build a safe space for people to ask questions and to learn more about their bodies and health.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And maybe a sense of scale, Nadia. So like where are you today? And then maybe convert the second question to that is, given the traction that you're seeing, how big do you think the opportunity is for you?
So right now our community is about 35,000 menstruators, which is really exciting. We see this could be a huge, huge opportunity. The menstrual product space is a $50 billion industry. Half the population will experience it. When we did our survey, we learned that 86% of menstruators experience some kind of tampon insertion pain or discomfort. So it really is a huge problem. And you think that if this is the first to market, we can kind of be that go-to brand when you think of lubricated tampons, and that in the future, we've seen people who really need the product. We've even seen people who maybe never thought they would need the product, but once they tried it, it's just that much more comfortable for them and they would never want to switch back. And so we see this could be the go-to product and we would replace all tampons and people would just use this product as opposed to other products.
It's like the classic, 1% of 50 billion is a lot. So,
exactly.
So you've taken destiny into your own hands in terms of your distribution and your community. Like you mentioned, you guys have built your own, website with referral and subscription. How much thought have you given to a more classic route, right? So the question I have is around, let's say, like the current markets where, direct to consumer companies are experiencing, challenges. Obviously the public stocks, but also just in terms of growing their own business, right? We've seen the challenge with Facebook and iOS.
Mm-hmm.
Have you given thought to the more classic route of distribution via, let's say, like pharmacies and, like the traditional retailers? Have you gone down that route? So curious to hear you about, like B2B versus B2C.
I think it's interesting because in the pandemic at the beginning, we saw a huge uptick in e-commerce and all things D2C. And now more so what we're seeing is subscription fatigue. And people are, at the beginning of the pandemic, subscribed to so many different things. And now they're trying to cut down and maybe only have a few that they really care about. And I think we're in a good position in that we're a necessity product. This is something that happens every single month, so it's very predictable. And it's something that lines up well with a subscription. The reason we even pursued a subscription in the first place is because customers told us stories about how it's the worst feeling to make that last minute trip to the drugstore and, you forgot to stock up and now you have your period and you're missing tampons. And they just wanted to have a convenient solution that always shows up at the same time every month and that they can rely on. And so I think we are really excited about the opportunity of D2C and how it matches so well with someone's menstrual cycle. But we're also open to B2B opportunities. I think now, like you said, we're seeing a lot of D2C brands doing an omni-channel approach and having a bit of both. And so if we can use kind of that B2B arm as more a discovery point for customers to learn about the brand, and then we bring them into the community, they take advantage of the convenience of D2C. I think having some kind of combination model is something we'll eventually work towards.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually, given the innovation of your product, that B2B ends up being a large piece of the pie, just because it seems like such a natural purchase habit still for so many women to just as they're going about their regular shopping, they're picking up that product. So being on the shelf is the challenge, right? So once you get on the shelf and build that habit, that's I think where sales can explode, because that's where still the majority, like 99% plus, I imagine, of sales of this category still happen. What about barriers of entry, right? Because once you get big at a certain scale, I imagine, like the big, evil companies today, they're not paying that much attention, I imagine. But how do you think about protecting, because it's relatively easy, I imagine, to copy. So a lot of your competitive advantage stems from the brand and the community that you've built. So how do you think about that? Is it even on your radar at this point, considering how early you are in the opportunity?
I think one thing is that there are some barriers on the regulatory side. So because it's a regulated product, it's a class 2 medical device, we had to go through a series of testing around like vaginal irritation and biocompatibility to make sure the products are safe to use together. That whole process to get our FDA and Health Canada approvals took up to a year. And so I think that kind of gives us a good headway into preventing other people from entering into the space. we decided not to file a patent. We had spoken to a variety of IP lawyers, and there were a lot of aspects of the product that could be patentable, but we were talking from a strategic perspective, and we said if P&G or some of the larger players really wanted to copy this product, they have much larger legal teams, much larger legal budgets than we could ever have, and they could find a way to tie us up in court if they really wanted to. But instead, they're making more acquisitions in the D2C space, and they're finding brands that have that community, that have that good brand presence, and partnering with them. And so instead of spending all that time and effort and money into filing a patent, we said, okay, let's put all that money into the community, into the brand, into getting that first mover advantage. And then hopefully we can be a good partner for some of these larger players in the future.
Yeah, it would make sense. If I was sitting on the Procter and Gamble side, it's like, oh, spend all this money to try and build it, or partner up, like you said. Do you foresee more avenues of growth, like other areas of women's health you could tackle? But considering, I know it's a question of focus. Also, it's like I'm not sure I would even venture down, hey, exploring other alternatives. But obviously, it's your company. So curious to hear what you think.
I think one thing is we want to eventually work towards being a one-stop shop for menstrual and sexual wellness and being that modern space where we approach it in a humorous and fun manner. And so we're starting with this product, but we do want to expand into other menstrual products and other sexual wellness products in the future. We believe that everyone should have options, whether it's you want to use period underwear or a cup, like everyone should have whatever option works for them. So if we can be that one-stop shop, both on the product side, but also on the education side for people to learn more about their bodies and kind of prioritize their menstrual and sexual health, that's our end goal for Marlow.
And the brand, curious, what is the brand name? Where did it come from? What's the backstory?
It's actually a funny story. We were looking and we were just thinking about what we want the brand to represent. And so we said we want it to be easily approachable. We almost want it to be like an older sister that you can turn to if you have questions and you just want to learn more. They are no BS. They're just kind of breaking it down in an easily digestible manner. And so we also wanted it to be gender neutral, to be appealing to every single kind of menstruator. And we had gone through a list of baby names to try and figure out what would be this older sister persona that is helpful for everyone. And Marlow ended up sticking out as one that is gender neutral. It captures that kind of older sister welcoming vibe. And it was so different from any of the other brands out there. You have like Tampax, Playtex, Kotex. It's all so similar, but this just stood out as something unique. And there was a lot of visual elements that our graphic designer liked as well, like the M and W are symmetrical and it's very even. So we ended up sticking with that after going through a whole list of baby names.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, coming up with a brand name, it's such a pain. But it sounds like you really fell off on a good one. Maybe on the personal front, like, what's been your most rewarding aspect of starting a company? Like, like imagine getting a few questions about quitting a really good job and like going down a more classic route, and working at a big brand for a while versus like the more rough and tumble, like the full on hands on combat of startup life. So yeah, most rewarding so far.
There's so many things that have been so rewarding. I think one thing would just be the learning aspect of it. In a startup, you're working on so many different aspects of business every single day. Part of your day will be fundraising, and then you're working on marketing, you're working on operations, and you have so much accountability at KPMG. I really loved that experience too, but you have, a manager who has a partner. So there's so many people that you can ask for help, or if you need kind of guidance. Whereas in a startup, you're doing it all yourself. And so you get used to quickly making decisions, sometimes maybe making the wrong call, but being accountable to all those decisions and learning quickly from them. So I think that would be one of my favorite parts, is just the broad amount of learning and the people I've gotten to meet through this experience too. Entrepreneurs are definitely a special kind of people, and hearing people who are so passionate about what they're building, just telling their story and how they got started. I couldn't imagine at the age of 23 meeting so many incredible people who are working on really, really big problems.
Yeah, amazing. And maybe most surprising thing that surprised you the most since you started?
I think one thing would just be the ambiguity of everything. I think because we're building a product that's never existed before, we're solving this market opportunity. There's no kind of playbook of what we should be doing and what we should follow. There's different comparables and examples that we can turn to. But at the end of the day, we're building what we want and we're building the pathway forward. And so sometimes there isn't always a clear direction or decision. But that's also kind of the exciting part too, is that we're building something that's completely our own. It's however we want to build it. And so it is very exciting as well at the same time.
Yeah. It almost feels like you've, in a short amount of time also become someone that people can look up to. And like you said, like be a role model to a certain extent, right? So have you ventured down, ventured down the mentoring route? Do people reach out to your advice? Like, hey, Nadia, how the fuck did you do this? Right? Like, I imagine something that must come up.
That's, yeah, definitely something I'm really passionate about. I remember my dad growing up, he always told me the quote that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so the idea is that if people are opening doors for you, you're getting opportunities. How do you make sure that you keep the door open for other people who are coming behind you? And so I definitely give back to my university. They've been so helpful in bringing us to this point. So we always kind of go back and do workshops at the accelerators, or I've actually gone and spoken in a few classes as well and connected with students afterwards who are interested in pursuing entrepreneurship. I am a mentor for junior achievement. So it works with high school students to learn about entrepreneurship. And as they start their own businesses, it's really exciting to kind of inspire the next generation of youth entrepreneurs and what they're working on. And then I'm also involved in Startup Canada. So I'm on the Startup Women Advocacy Network to help other Ontario kind of founders to learn more about what it is to do in entrepreneurship, to advocate at government roundtables, and just kind of work on the policy side of entrepreneurship as well.
If we go back to Marlow for a second, like what would you say is your biggest like current challenge, right? If you have the classic magic wand that can make it go away, at your current stage today, what would it be?
I think one thing would be continuing to generate brand awareness because it's such a product that no one's heard of. It takes quite a few touch points with the customer before they decide to purchase. I think there's kind of almost, we've realized, an educational journey that we have to take the customer on to first say, this is a problem. People realize it's a problem, but they don't realize that it's normal to experience this problem. I think because it's so stigmatized, they think, oh, I shouldn't be talking about this. I shouldn't tell people that this is a problem I have. So we have to kind of first go through that education of, yes, this is a problem and it's okay that you experience it because so many other menstruators do. Then showing them that this is the ideal solution because it's not a product that exists, kind of getting them to try it and seeing that it actually works. And then kind of maintaining that relationship has been more of the easy part because once people do try it, they're loving the product and we have a really low churn rate. So I think it's more just that earlier stages of the funnel of brand awareness and educating people that this is a product that could be really helpful for them.
Yeah, why is it still a stigma? It's like, it's a bit disappointing to say, hey, it's 2022 and this is still a topic that's sort of taboo. Well, at least I'm hearing you say it is. So what do you think that is, and what can be done to educate more, get more awareness? And like, guys, is like I said, it's a normal bodily function. It's not something
Mm-hmm.
that's external. It's something imposed upon you by by your biology, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that just through kind of sparking conversations that we can create a ripple effect. I know even there's different competitions or investor pitches and we'll go into the room and you can visibly see people getting uncomfortable every time we say period or menstruation or anything related to the topic. So I think the more we can have these conversations and just bring it out into the open, then the more it can kind of create a ripple effect for them to talk about it with their friends and their family and so on.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like it seems like it should be the case, but yeah, props to you, obviously fighting on that front as well. And Nadia, this has been amazing. I've learned so much. Maybe like final question or two is how do you see Marlow in a few years? Like how big do you think the opportunity is? Like maybe international or different products. If you have to zoom out and like say best case for you guys, and maybe you have another boatload of money to go B2B, etc. Like how would you paint that the rosy picture of where you're headed?
One thing is right now we're available in Canada and the US, but we definitely want to expand. We see huge opportunity in the UK. Almost daily, we get hundreds of messages from people saying we want this product in the UK and people are really excited about it. So that would be one thing. Definitely expanding into the B2B side, having this available at all pharmacies so that people can go in and purchase it and try the product. And then new products as well. So continuing to build that one-stop shop for menstrual and sexual wellness.
Nadia, continued success. Really amazing to see you go on this journey. Final question: best way to learn, connect, reach out, and learn about the work you guys are doing at Marlow.
So our Instagram is at Marlow. You can connect with us there. Our TikTok is at We Are Marlow, and that's also our website, wearemarlow.com. You can also reach out to any of the founders on LinkedIn. We're always happy to chat and connect, and we love meeting with people with our community and hearing their feedback. So open to connecting on LinkedIn as well.
Nadia, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.